Ladies, gentlemen, and Haradrim of all ages, we are now just over a week out from the end of the 2 weekends of Diablo 4's beta, and, well, I can very firmly and passionately say that I miss it. I know we only had access to content in one zone, and only up to level 25, but I was playing the hell out of it. I had almost 3 classes up to level 25. I've experienced every dungeon that was there, every stronghold, every side quest. I was really just giving it my all, just enjoying what the game had to offer, and I'm sad that it's gone. That said, it does make me excited for the release of the game itself come June if I'm feeling this way now. There won't be any time limits on how long we can play it, or any progress blocking gates to prevent us from truly experiencing the game as a whole. With that said, with the conclusion of the beta, we've been hearing some word from Blizzard themselves, and specifically the Diablo team, of course, about the game, about potential changes, about what was different in the beta than will be in the full game, and of course a lot of talk about balancing. So let's break down all the info that we've been given in a nice fun way to try and tide over the agonizingly long wait until the game releases properly. First up, let's look at the stats that Blizzard released from the beta weekends. Here is the first weekend stats: almost 21 million hours played across all players, 17.5 million deaths during that time, over 9 billion kills on enemies, and then of course we have the Butcher stats. The Butcher in the beta had a random chance of showing up at different points in pretty much any dungeon that you did, and of course he killed a ton of players, being in a pretty difficult boss position to deal with. Out of the almost 700,000 encounters that players had with the Butcher, only about 1/6 of those resulted in the Butcher's death. Then we of course had the world boss as well, which was a really neat experience new to the series, and while he managed to kill 33,000 Deshavas, he also killed over 4 million players, so, you know, pretty even, I guess. Then we move on to the second weekend, the proper public open beta, in which there was 61.5 million hours played. This time they provided us with stats on the most popular classes, and this probably doesn't surprise anyone, but it is both Sorcerer and Necromancer. Big, fun, nasty spell effects, good kiting and survival ability, really strong abilities as well, and they're just enjoyable classes with really well-defined class fantasies that are executed extremely well within the game. Over 2.6 million separate players hit level 20, as this is the requirement for the Beta Wolf pack. There were about 47 million deaths, 29 billion monsters slain, and the Butcher of course had a good time once again, though the ratio implies that players had a bit of an easier time killing him during the second weekend. If I had to guess, I'd say that's partially due to all the really strong Necromancers running around this time. As for the world boss, there were 100,000 of them slain during the weekend, which is quite impressive in itself. Now, a fair bit of this is sort of just interesting stats that don't really tell us a whole lot, but there are a couple of things that I want to focus in on here. First up, a reminder that this is a literal blue post from the devs that this was the beta. It's not a demo, it is a beta, and they use it to test the game. The game is unfinished, and this will help finish it for them. Test balancing, test servers, test leveling speed, test drop rates, and they got 61 million hours played of testing as a result. Think of it this way: in game development, there is a period of quality assurance, or QA, in which you have a team of people who just play the game loads to try and find bugs and fine-tune balancing and issues. A big QA team is about 100 people. To have a QA team of that size hit 61.5 million hours played, they would need to put in approximately 7,000 years playing the game for 24 hours a day, no sleep, no food, no bathroom breaks. In other words, the biggest thing this beta did was help the devs find all the tiny little bugs, the bigger, more problematic bugs as well, get a ton of feedback on balancing, and this is massive for making sure that the launch of the game proper in June goes nice and smoothly. Past that, we have a lot more specific questions and responses. Rod Ferguson, who is the general manager of all things Diablo at Blizzard, had a chat with a journalist about the balancing part of the game. A specific thing that he said was that not all classes in the game should feel equally balanced at all points. While this may sound a little funny as its own sentence, what he's saying is basically we are only experiencing the first 25 levels of the game. Druid and Barbarian don't even have access to the unique class abilities, the Barbarian technique slot is unable to be unlocked in the Fractured Peaks, and the Druid Spirit Boons are also unable to be unlocked for the same reason. So even if nothing else, those two classes will feel weaker right now as a result of simply that. Past this, he's also stating that balancing is less done around the early game than the later game. Yes, some classes will level much faster than others. They want to make this less of a gap between them, of course, but essentially in order to make the numbers make sense in late game when working with tons of legendary powers overlapping, some classes simply will be stronger earlier on than others will. That said, this of course shows that they are very aware of players' concerns about balancing in the current state of the beta itself. Then we have a couple of talks about legendaries specifically. First up, someone asked if the drop rates are a little bit off for the beta, and Rod Ferguson said yes, they are actually tuned much higher to let players experience more things within the beta period. What this means is that legendaries won't be dropping quite as frequently on launch, and honestly that's fair enough. It is sort of weird to be only level 25 and have orange in every single slot, each synergizing well together with your other legendaries and with your class abilities as well, so don't expect them to drop quite as frequently in the live game. That said, we have only really touched the surface of available legendaries that are in the game as well. We also have this tweet from Joseph Pipiora, a senior director on the game itself, mentioning that the specific amount of legendary powers that are around. When we are having our legendaries drop in the beta, lots of people were looking at the Codex of Power and saying, okay, these must be the legendary powers available to my class. Joseph here states in a response to this tweet, as well specifically, that the Codex of Power in the beta contains less than half of the legendary powers that will be around in the full game, which is extremely exciting to hear. Not to mention that higher world tiers will be available too, which contain unique grade items, and items above that too that should have even more special effects as well.
Oh wow, new toys!
On top of this, Rod once again responded to a question about leveling speed, asking if leveling speed was tuned differently in the beta, and his only response is that balancing is a journey, which implies that, yeah, leveling will probably be a bit different in the full game than it currently is, because they're still balancing it. We don't know if this means it'll be faster or if it'll be slower, but I would assume it would be a bit faster, as they want people to be able to reach the later game relatively quickly to keep interest nice and high in order to get to the actual meat of the game. This sort of goes hand in hand with the legendary drop rates as well, as if the legendary drop rate is lower, they want you to reach higher levels before you get full inventories of legendaries and reach your actual properly put together builds. Past this, we had acknowledgement of a bug that we hadn't heard before, which is Necromancer skeletons being visible to players within the town. This is actually a bug, and well, that makes a lot of sense honestly. In towns you can have loads of other players loaded in that you can see walking around, and if this happens to all be Necromancers at the same time, and they happen to all have 8 or even more summons, then the town will just be filled to the brim with skeletons, which is sort of hilarious to think about. On which note, we had a bit of clarification about the dynamic matchmaking system. In world boss areas, the cap to other players that you can see is 12, including yourself, of course. This is to have the world boss fights be balanced in a specific way. In towns, you can encounter even more players than that, as they want the towns to feel properly populated depending on the size of the town. But in wild areas, you'll have way less players on your screen than that, as they still want it to feel like there are other people in the world, but they don't want it to feel like a full-on MMO while you're leveling either, when other people are competing quest objectives against each other in droves before you even enter the area. I'm still pretty 50-50 on the system as a whole myself in Diablo. I love the world boss experience, and that makes it worth having for me, but seeing people in the overworld sort of hurts my immersion for the game itself, and it doesn't really help my enjoyment of it either. With that then, once again, we hear from Rod. This is a bit of a silly, joking response, but someone says that Necromancer is busted, and he says that he needs his tattoo to pay off. As we see from this post as well, Rod Ferguson is a Necromancer main, and again, Rod Ferguson is the general manager of all things Diablo. So, well, I don't know, I'm just saying, no matter what balancing does occur, I would expect Necromancer to remain in a pretty good place. It probably won't be absolutely busted anymore at launch, at least not for a bit, but it'll never be fully nerfed into the ground because, well, one of the most important people in the process of creating this game considers this class his baby, essentially. So Necromains, just don't worry too much. Then finally today we have one last bit of news, and it's news about news, really. We don't have a specific date yet, but the devs have been talking quite a bit about a big developer livestream that they'll be doing for Diablo 4 sometime this month, in April, where they'll go over progression, endgame, balancing changes, all of that, and just really overload us with all the information on the things that we've been asking questions about, not only since the beta, but even before the beta too. This should be quite fun. It should give us a really much bigger concept of what's going on in the full game, and hopefully it will help us understand how the classes will be changing going into launch, if at all. And that just about does it for now, everyone. I'm really missing Diablo 4 personally since the beta closed down, and I'm pretty excited for the full game. I can't wait for that live stream later this month just to get a few more crumbs of information. I hope you've enjoyed this little roundup of all the news that's been going on recently about the game, and let us know, what are you looking forward to most when it comes to the full game release in June? Like if you like the video, subscribe to the notification bell for more, and most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, until next time, stay sweet.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.